Hello and welcome to another interview episode of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths. I'm John Cripwell, and today we're going to be thinking all about games. In this episode, we explore what gamifying maths really means, the difference between games that help pupils show how strong they are in a particular concept versus those that actually help them to get stronger, and what teachers and educators should be looking for when deciding whether a digital maths game is genuinely supporting learning or simply dressing practice up as play. We talk about task design, feedback, time pressures, motivation, inclusion, and the role of the teacher in making games meaningful rather than just superficial. If you've ever wondered when maths games can help, when they might hinder, and how to use them well in a time-poor classroom, then I think this conversation is for you. My guest today is Dr. Sam Parks, and I am delighted to have her on the show. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So, Sam, is it okay just to give listeners and viewers a little bit of a context to yourself? What's kind of your background? What are you doing now? And how did you end up there?
Okay. Yeah. So I am at heart a primary school teacher. I was started teaching over 20 years ago, nearly 25 years ago now, and was in across the primary age range. And then I was a maths leader. And then I did the primary maths specialism, the MAST program. And got really super interested in maths pedagogy and access to maths and equity in maths. And then a job came up at my local university to be a senior lecturer on the ITE program. So then for the next sort of 12 years, I worked there teaching on the undergrad and postgraduate programs. I got my master's, and I also worked across an academy trust as a school improvement specialist for primary maths as well. And during that, I then did my doctorate, which was all about how we evaluate primary mathematics teaching, kind of who gets to say who the good teachers are and why. And then recently, over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, I've got really interested in the idea of play and playful pedagogies in teaching. Worked quite closely with a couple of colleagues, a maths colleague and an early years colleague at the university, to put together a book about early years maths. And that's really made me think about, okay, so there are definitely principles of play that are learning that can be helpful no matter what your age.
Yeah.
And then, so from that and that sort of interest with maths pedagogy and access to maths and playful learning, I'm currently doing some work with a company called Number Club, who design what I think are really great digital mathematical games for children to develop their fluency. So it sort of brings together quite a lot of strands of my interests at the moment in thinking about, how do we help children enjoy and get better at maths.
Sorry, just for listeners, I just had to take a small break there just because the rain was pounding so heavily on the flat roof here. I could hardly hear what Sam was saying. But Sam, a huge wealth of experience there, particularly in primary education and maths. Was maths something that you enjoyed when you were a pupil at school?
And that's the nub of it, isn't it? Not really, no. I certainly went through my primary and secondary schooling of maths feeling quite anxious about the whole thing. And dropped it like a hot potato when I hit 16. So to have ended up where I am now is a bit of a surprise. In fact, people that I went to college with think it's hilarious because I did drama and theatre and English and all those sorts of media studies, all that sort of stuff. But it was actually the teaching year 6 and realising that I was just frightened every day going in to teach year 6 maths. And at a very similar time, an opening for the maths subject leader post came up in my primary school. And my head teacher said to me, "It's probably about the time in your career that you should be thinking about middle leadership. What do you reckon?" And I just thought, okay, in for a penny, in for a pound. What's the best way to fight your demons? Probably head on. So I became maths leader, and I joined I think I was in the first cohort of the MAST program at Brighton University. And I had a couple of sessions with the incredible lecturers there that just absolutely blew apart my previous conceptions of what maths was and whether or not I was a maths person. And from that moment, really, that set me on this trajectory of, oh my goodness, it's not me. It's never
Yeah,
been me.
yeah,
And
yeah.
actually,
We've got a remarkably similar background there, a little bit, really,
okay.
Sam. In so much as I dropped maths as soon as I could at 16 as well, and at A level I did English and theatre studies, and law actually, because I then went on and did law at university. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, maths was not ever something that was on my radar, and I didn't think of myself as a mathematician. I always think it's fascinating to have these conversations with people working in maths education now, because I would say probably from the guests that I've had on this podcast, at least 50% maths was not their
Yeah.
favourite subject, or and for a lot of them actually a subject that they didn't enjoy particularly at school.
Mm,
So for me, it's just reinforcing that idea that these things are plastic. That it's not concrete. You're not born a mathematician or not a mathematician.
mm,
It's not necessarily about some innate ability. I think that there's definitely something in how you understand maths, because I was exactly the same. I did the maths course, and worked with some fantastic lecturers there, and particular one, Dave Benson, who I always like to call out, because he really brought maths alive for me in a way that nobody
mm,
else had done
mm,
before, and helped
mm.
me to understand it conceptually, which made it an enormous difference.
Yeah.
Um, and I love the fact that that is the basis of a lot of our pedagogy now in terms of teaching maths, particularly if you're following a teaching for mastery sort of approach,
Mm,
that we really try to get to conceptual understanding for our pupils rather than just procedural fluency.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
However, what I'm slightly concerned with is that, as with everything, it's spinning plates, isn't it? And
Hmm.
teaching, as we know, is an art form of spinning a multitude of different plates at any one time. Um, but sometimes when we introduce something new, we lose something that we had before. And I'm slightly concerned that with maths education, we might be going down a road where we're losing some of that play-based pedagogy quite
Hmm.
early on in children's educational journeys. Not necessarily in reception. I expect, from what I see in most EYFS settings, there's a fantastic range of play-based activities going on there in terms of the continuous provision and
Hmm.
all sorts of things. But almost immediately when we move into Key Stage 1, we see a lot more expectations in terms of children writing in books, sitting at tables, um, and it becomes very, very formal quite quickly, and a lot of worksheets introduced and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Again, none of that is necessarily a problem in and of its own, but
Yeah.
if there isn't that opportunity for exploration and play and all of that sort of good stuff,
Yeah.
then I worry that some children will become disengaged, as I did, as
Mm,
yourself,
mm.
did. Um, so all of that to say, Sam, I suppose I'm not going to solve all of that problem this morning, but what are the benefits of a more sort of play based approach at different ages? Is you've already alluded to the fact that you don't believe play is just something for 4 and 5 year olds
Mm.
in terms of their learning journeys. Where does play come into maths education elsewhere?
I think defining play is really complex and really difficult. And I worry a little bit that when we hear the word play, we only think about this idea of free play. Do what you want, when you want, how you want, with whatever or who you want. That kind of,
Yeah, yeah,
which
we're
is
going out to play
definitely,
now. It's playtime. This is the less
mm,
structured bit. You can, do what you want.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's definitely one aspect of play, and some learning can come from that, I'm sure. But one of the things that's really influenced my thinking about this is a study that was done by Alison James, 2022, and she did a study into play in HE. So how
Right.
might we bring
Okay.
in the value of play in higher education? And one of the things she did as part of her study was ask lots of people about what they thought play was, and she came up with like a great, like comprehensive list of the different ways to think of play. And one of them that I like to think is really helpful in terms of application to maths is a sort of attitude, a way of thinking, a way of approaching things, which intersects with what I'm given to do, and what I'm given to think about. But for me, being playful is about having choices or opportunities to rearrange things or look at them from a different angle. Or so it's sort of exploratory. It involves curiosity. It probably involves, but not always, collaboration. I can play quite happily independently, and I might want to also have a little bit of input from someone else and play with their ideas as well. Um, the idea that mathematics can be immersive in some way, that I might enjoy the maths for the maths sake.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting. I've spoken to a few people recently about puzzles and the place
yeah,
that puzzles have in maths education, and how
yeah.
we we can we can be doing a puzzle that doesn't overtly seem to have anything to do with maths necessarily, but actually
Mm.
that way of thinking is a mathematical way of thinking that helps you to engage with the puzzle.
Yeah, and I think there are some really strong connections to be made between playful approaches to learning and teaching and mathematical reasoning. We can think about mathematical reasoning, and I mean, you can also call it mathematical thinking, can't you? Really, and this decision making, which comes back to this idea of choice. So I think there's huge potential for even taking, as you were saying, some of the more kind of repetitive, maybe worksheet based resources that are very helpfully produced for us by lots and lots of different people, and putting a playful lens on them. If we can agree on or design a sort of definition of play that says, right, this is how we could approach this task playfully.
Yeah.
I think there's possibly something in that that can not just increase engagement, not just affect how we feel about what we're learning, but genuinely open up maths as a subject that's more about finding your way through connections and patterns and this sort of web of understanding, rather than something that's kind of overly simplified to, one route here to there, right
Yes.
and wrong,
Here's the
job done.
rule. Follow this procedure. Yeah. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
things that sticks with me from the MAST course was sitting in a. Actually, we weren't in a university for this one. We were in uh, an event space, I think, some sort of mill building in Derbyshire. Um, but anyway, I sat at this table with some multi-link cubes, and we were exploring cube numbers and what happens as you start
Mm.
to add more layers to the cube, and what do you think might happen, and what what actually does happen, and can you explain why that happens? Um, and I can still recall that kind of 15 years later, and the sort of little light bulb moments that I had through very much what you were
Yeah.
saying. We were kind of playing with the cubes. We weren't making guns and things that
Had
sometimes.
you done that already? You got that out of the
Well,
way.
exactly. We were given 10 minutes to do that earlier. The cubes were out on the table when we came in. Help yourself.
Mm.
Yeah, so we got that out of our system. But uh, that it was very much a play-based approach, I suppose,
Mm.
but with the skill being from the facilitator or the lecturer at the time to ask the key questions that sort
Yeah.
of helped our thinking develop, I suppose.
Yeah. I'll never forget, I had a similar moment when the use of Dean's equipment in a similar session made me realize for the first time in my life why you carry the one.
Yes. Yeah. 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 I don't think it was until I started teaching, and certainly not in my first year of teaching, that I really understood that we have a base 10 system,
Yeah, and
which
what
sounds crazy,
decomposition
doesn't
is,
it?
and yeah,
Yeah. But
yeah, yeah,
why it's 0 to 9, and then you've got that, and the
yeah,
family of numbers as you go through hundreds, thousands,
yeah,
10,000s, millions. Anyway,
yeah,
yeah, which is all to say that I probably should have picked up those things earlier, but didn't. I think what you've said about the definition of play-based learning is really helpful, actually, because otherwise we might just be thinking of setting up activities around the room, a little bit like a
yes,
continuous provision thing, and saying, go and
yeah,
explore these.
yeah,
And whilst I think there's sometimes a place for that, again, just to this is not a sales pitch for the maths course. Unfortunately, I don't think it exists anymore. But on
No.
the first night of the residential, there were activities set up around the room. I don't know if it was the same for you, Sam, but
Mhm.
activities set up around the room, and we went round. It was almost like a crystal maze thing, and we went round and explored all these different
Yeah.
activities and
Yeah.
games and puzzles, and there were points awarded and that sort of thing. And it
Yeah.
was a really great way of immersing us into we're here to do some maths
Yes.
and talking to people about it and seeing what you notice and that sort of thing. So
And
I
I
think
think
there is a
that's
place for
where,
that.
yeah, but I think that's where the intersection between how I approach the learning is dependent on the task design as well. Because what you've just mentioned there has reminded me of observing several, well, many students' lessons over the years, and they, so many of them have this value of I want the children to enjoy the maths, I want them to engage with it, I want to find it fun, all those great things. So they'll design sort of almost like you're saying, like a carousel of activities, or like a treasure hunt, or um, a kind of escape room-esque kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
And there was often a point where the children would go to the activity, or they'd go to the next clue or whatever, and it would be a question, a maths question. And my difficulty was always, right, okay, but what if at this point they don't know the answer?
Yeah.
And I think that for me has become one of the real fundamental bits of understanding that I'm developing about play-based and games-based learning. That how do I turn this into something that's a learning opportunity? Is what is there to support me as a learner at the point at which I don't know the answer? Because otherwise it's just a test sort of
Yeah.
dressed up.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
um,
exactly. And I think we've all done those activities and
mm,
witnessed the problems that they can
yeah.
have.
All with the
Um,
best intentions.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I used to do orienteering sort of maths, so it would be a PE lesson, but with a bit of maths
Yeah.
thrown in, really, which in year six to me just seemed like a good way of practicing, getting a little bit of practice of arithmetic or whatever into an orienteering lesson. And again,
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but it's not a maths
No.
lesson. It's it's a an orienteering game with a little bit of maths in it. So
Yeah.
is that something that we need to think about in terms of when we're thinking about potentially gamifying maths, if you like? Because there is, I suppose, a temptation to think, okay, children love games. We see children playing with games. We know if we give them, let's talk about digital games a little bit. We know if we give them an iPad or
Mm,
a laptop, they will be completely immersed in and engaged in using that technology. I'm not
yes.
going to say the maths, but in
Yes.
using that technology. So, is the answer simply to do everything through a tablet or a computer and gamify maths, if you like? Do you think that would what's the is that an approach that we could take?
I think it really, like with all sort of tasks or activities, it really depends on what the game is asking them to do. What you just said there reminded me of this idea of proxies for learning. Just because they look busy, or just because
Yeah,
they look absorbed, doesn't necessarily mean that there's learning happening. So, I think I think for me, the main question I started to ask myself during my teaching career, and I'm really like delving deeper into now, is w- where's the maths? Is the
yeah,
maths something that is sort of, it's my ticket to the next bit of the game? So I'm actually playing a game, and I can carry on with the game if I know a bit of maths that will help me to the next bit. Or am I actually playing with the mathematics? Are there things that help me to use all that mathematical thinking, or provoke me to think mathematically? Am I having to think about spatial reasoning, pattern, use my number sense, develop my number sense? I mean, the vast majority of digital maths games are arithmetic based. There's a real lack of, there's a few geometry and measurement ones out there, but the vast majority of them are arithmetical. Um, but again, am I moving on from this idea of the game is enabling me to practice facts I already know, or it's drilling me on facts to find out whether I know them or not? Or is it designed in a way that is helping me to grow learning, grow thinking, grow understanding if it's not already there? And I think that's really key as teachers when we're evaluating whether or not to use a game.
Yeah, because I suppose it comes back to, as with most things with teaching, that task design, as you
Yeah.
say, and being really clear on what's the purpose of what I'm asking the children to do. Because we
Mm.
know, for example, there are some fantastic apps and games, of some very famous ones, um, designed to help children and pupils practice their times tables, for
Yeah.
example,
Hmm.
and gamifying, you know, practicing of times tables. What I'm not sure that those things necessarily do is develop an understanding of what 9 times 6 really means. Uh,
Mm.
in order to be successful, I just need to know that 9 times 6 is 54, and I can input that and get
Yeah.
the credit for it. And I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with that either.
No.
That, you know, the way that we're assessing children in times tables requires them to be able to do that.
Hmm.
Um, but it's not the same as teaching them 9 times 6, is it?
Yeah, and why is 9 times 6 that? And if I don't know 9 times 6, we used to have this phrase in the curriculum about using related facts, didn't we? Can I deduce
Yeah,
using? It was something like that, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're right.
Um, so if I don't know 9 sixes, do I know 9 threes, and do I understand enough about multiplication to know that I double that because
Yeah,
I've sort of understood the structure of multiplication and what's happening to the numbers. Um, I think one of the things that I've come to as an analogy for being able to identify and evaluate maths games, and again, you're absolutely right. Everything in terms of our mathematics teaching always comes down to what are you trying to achieve? What's the
yeah,
purpose? What do you want? What's it? So the an analogy that I've come to use is this idea of: is it a game that enables me to show how strong I am, or is it a game that enables me to get stronger? So this
right.
idea
Okay.
of building mathematical kind of muscle, if you like. So
Yes.
does the game support me? And actually sometimes watching children play the sorts of games that enable them to develop mathematical muscle can be a little bit painful because, you can watch children playing games that you think, oh, why have they done that again? Is it not apparent to them that you can't, no, you can't do that with those numbers? But that's the nature of actual learning, is that it's messy and it might take several attempts of trial and error. That's another one of actually Alison James's definitions of play, is that in order for something to be playful, it needs to be a safe space to experiment, to have a go and to try again. And
Yeah.
I know that we really talk about how that matters and growth mindset and all of those sorts of things. But that can be really tricky, particularly in a culture where we're increasingly worried about sort of performance and there's not a lot of time and we've got to get through a lot of things. Oh my God, how are you still making that mistake?
Yes.
But that is where the learning is going to happen. And then there are other games that are probably are definitely really well timed for once children have got a bit of muscle behind them, to be able to kind of strengthen that muscle in a repetitive way. I mean,
Yes.
there's all sorts of things in that analogy, I think, that are helping me to make sense of the different types of games and why we might use each one.
I think that's a really helpful way to look at it, because we know that there is a real requirement actually for practice, and that practice is very, very important. Hopefully intelligent practice, so we're not just endlessly just completing
Mm,
a random variety of questions.
mm,
Um, but there's some intelligence to how they're structured, which I think digital games have a huge capacity to allow, and to, particularly, I suppose, as we're moving ever more towards AI and that sort of thing, being integrated into things, the way that digital games might be able to provide the next bit of practice that is different from something that a pupil's done successfully before is
yeah.
really interesting. But it's not, those sorts of games are not replacement for actually teaching. We're not necessarily learning anything new at that point, are we? And it's really important to recognise that. If the purpose is to practice something that we've already learned, it's really important as the teacher that we recognise that that isn't, though, a way of instilling new learning, is it? That it's not
Mm,
replacing. We're not
mm.
necessarily expecting children. There might be a light bulb moment that comes through it, but that's incidental to the purpose of why we're doing that particular
Yeah.
practice.
And I think for me, one of the things that I'm intrigued by is is again defining the word practice. And are there ways of making practice playful or nourishing in
Yeah.
some way? There's some work done by Colin Foster there about something called, I don't know how you pronounce this, mathematical etudes, might be
Okay.
Etudes. And he was talking about Chopin's musical etudes and about how these were beautiful pieces of music that were written in order to enable you to practice a specific skill on the piano. So through practicing with these pieces of music, you were still producing something sort of beautiful and enjoyable,
Yes. Yeah.
but it was also tailored towards a specific skill that you wanted to develop. So there's something in this. Is there? I think games have the potential to fill this gap between um, playful learning and practice because they can give a bit of structure and focus to that.
Yeah. As you're talking there, Sam, I'm just thinking that um, there's. I've been doing a lot of work on problem solving recently as well, and thinking about problem solving, and quite famously, um, one of the things about problem solving is that if we've just, for example, spent a week on subtraction, and then I give you some questions about subtraction, that's not necessarily problem solving because you already know how, if I've taught you well, you already know how
Mm,
to answer those questions. We're just
mm,
practicing a skill that we've done. But if we've not done any work on subtraction and I give you some questions on subtraction where you don't know how to do it, that might be problem solving, but you don't have the skills in order to be able to solve the problem.
yeah,
And as you say, there's a bridge there, isn't there, where you can begin to explore things, and potentially a game might have the ability to help you make connections that you didn't have before.
yeah.
Is
Yes,
that
I
what you're
think
saying?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think there are many different ways into and through mathematical knowledge and understanding. And sometimes we might want to be walked towards, this is the knowledge that you need. This is how you apply it, and here's how you can apply it. Off you go. And other times we might want to sort of jump in at the deep end and go, oh, what's going on here? What do I know that could help me? What don't I know that I need to go and find out? What is here that is unnecessary, that's irrelevant? And that's the kind of problem solving that, again, we're right back at that point of, but it's messy and it's time consuming and it's kind of uncontrollable because it's so
Yeah.
dependent on so many different variables and how individuals approach that sort of thing. Um, but I wonder if, yeah, there's a place for games in the classroom that could go some way to meeting some of that type of mathematical thinking and learning.
And again, I think we need to be careful. We're not just talking about digital games here, but maybe some of those rich tasks as well that we
Yeah.
think of,
Agreed.
that are exploratory, as you say, and
Yeah. Yeah.
have all those features that allow connections to be made between things that you already know, but things you didn't realise yet.
Yeah.
One of the ways that I like to think about it. Yeah.
Well, again, we can talk about how do you define the difference between a game, an activity, a task, an investigation, a
Yeah.
problem. They're all in the mix, aren't they?
Yeah.
Um, and I think conversations about those things, I don't know that we necessarily have to reach an absolute dictionary definition consensus about what all those things are, but conversations about them and the place that they might have and the role that they might play in your classroom, I think are really helpful professionally. Especially if we're thinking about trying to enrich and enhance the curriculum that's already steady and in place.
Yeah, for me, I'm just reflecting on my own practice, and as you mentioned before, even when you are using a scheme of work that may come with pre-prepared questions and worksheets and that sort of thing, which is really helpful to teachers. We know
Yeah.
primary school teachers teaching 5, 6 lessons a day, to
Mm.
be able to prepare and write all of those um, questions and things would take an awfully long time. So the schemes are really, really helpful. They're
Yeah.
well written and useful. But it's the way that they're used, as you sort of alluded to earlier, that can make the difference between whether they're engaging or not engaging.
Mm.
And I was always wary that I didn't want to just have a PowerPoint on the screen that I would just tap through, things would magically appear on the screen, and then magically disappear on the screen, or turn into something else. And I always felt that there was a risk of losing pupils along the way doing that. They didn't see where the numbers were coming from and going to. I much preferred modeling things on a flip chart or writing things myself on the interactive whiteboard, and having conversations and exploring things together. And I suppose
Mm.
that's another version of playful or play-based learning, I guess, in
Yeah.
so much as we're looking. I wonder what happens if we do this. What do you think might
Yes.
happen? All of those kinds of conversations that happen in great classrooms, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but let's focus a bit more on games themselves then.
Mhm.
And you're now, as you mentioned before, doing some work with Number Club and
Mhm.
focusing on digital games. And I've had a look at some of those digital games and got hooked on one of them a little bit. What makes, and you may have already covered this a little bit, but I don't think there's any harm in going over it. What makes uh, a, a digital maths game a well designed digital maths game, something that is going to add value to, as you say, a very time poor
Mm.
curriculum and
Mm.
set of teachings supports that we've got?
Okay, so one of the bits of work that's really helped me to kind of clarify lots of different ideas around this is a bit of work done by somebody called Mayer in 2019. He wrote a book called Computer Games for Learning and talked about maths within that. Um, I think I've already mentioned the idea that I think the game needs to have maths at its heart, and that's one of the things he talks about. There needs to be a clear kind of maths focus, maths learning outcome.
And just to be clear there, you're saying rather than just, I'm going to design a game that's a fun game and then add some maths to it, you're thinking about, let's start
I'm
with the
playing
maths.
with the maths, I'm playing with the numbers.
Yeah.
And that links to another thing that I think is really important in the design, which also connects really nicely to good mathematical pedagogy, which is about representations. How does this game show the mathematics? If it's all abstract numerals, it's not going to be as well designed for learning as a game that's got some sort of image, some sort of iconic visual representation of size, quantity, whatever, if we're talking about arithmetic games. So I think that's really important. And that's one of the things that can enable scaffolding of learning as well. That makes them more accessible if you're talking about meeting the needs of different children and different learners. I think a really good maths game, digital maths game, is one where there are lots and lots of opportunities for children to make choices. Because at every point that they're making a choice, they're making a mathematical decision. And that might not be the right mathematical decision in terms of the goal that they're trying to meet. But another thing that Maya talks about is that feedback is really important and it needs to be rich feedback. So, how does the game communicate to the player when they've not achieved what they set out to achieve? And what do they then have the option to do about it?
I think that's really important because, again, one of the threads that has come through many of the conversations I've had with interviewees on this podcast has, and particularly those who did not enjoy maths at school, often it was because they were either right or they were wrong,
Yeah.
and it felt like when you were wrong, that was a barrier that it was just closed off. That's wrong. Do it again.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, and that's not necessarily helpful, is it? And there's a potential with digital games where there isn't somebody there to explain something to you that you get stuck and you can't do anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. And because the vast majority of digital games are played individually, that has hugely detrimental effects if I get to a dead end. I'm like, okay, well,
Yes.
yeah, I don't know, and now I've got all of that stuff going on inside me that is making me realize I don't know that, but I don't know how to learn it. And I now feel all those negative things that you feel when you're told that you've got something wrong.
Yeah.
So the game needs to be supportive of what if I don't know this? How is the game helping me learn the thing? So again, it's probably going to be messy. It's probably going to be time consuming, which brings me to another element. This isn't explicitly one of Maya's design features, but it's one that I think connects, which is I think speed is a time pressure, and the need to think quickly shuts down those opportunities for reasoning and that
Yeah.
playful element of I've got time here to try something out, and the consequence of me getting it wrong is that I get to try again, rather than the consequence of me getting it wrong is that, as we've just said, that is now shut off from me and I'm on to the next thing, which I may or may not know and may or may not get right.
Yeah.
So one of the things Maya talks about is opportunities for reasoning are really, really important. And I think that connects to what you're saying about, about uh,
Yeah, I just
time
think
and speed and
sometimes when you take the person out of the equation in terms of the teacher, and again, I think there's a place where games can be used alongside a teacher or an adult, or but where you take the person out, you lose some of the capacity, don't you, potentially for that extra question that might just unlock
yes,
something, or just
yeah,
spotting where the misconception is and just
yeah.
addressing that quickly. And you end up, as you say, just stuck and unable to move forward.
And that's where I go back to pedagogical principles of early years practice, and about this idea of what's the role of the adult in an early years environment. What's the role of the adult?
Yeah,
And sometimes the role of the adult is to observe and to give time and space and to allow the child to think at their own speed and to get things wrong and retry again. And then for the adult then to judge when is it the right moment to step in, to intervene, to ask a question, to give a prompt, to offer a provocation, those kinds of things that will then advance the thinking. Or even more important, not even more importantly as well, but more relatedly perhaps to game playing, a sort of post-match analysis, a
yeah,
kind of, okay, so why did you make that decision there? So
yeah,
that one of the things that digital games could offer, can offer, is the ability to play back the levels that the children have played, and maybe watch those together and go, so how come you repeatedly couldn't remember that 8 4s do not make 36? What was
yeah,
going on? I mean, you probably wouldn't
yeah,
phrase it like that with that tone, but
yeah, 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 yeah,
but the opportunity to have that kind of reflective, metacognitive discussion is another learning opportunity. That if you've got a well-designed game, and I'm now thinking that you could even. I'm branching out from digital games here, but what if children were playing mathematical card games or whatever, or a Cuisinart rods game or anything like that, and you film them doing it, and then part of your learning is to watch it back with them and say, what
yeah,
happened there? Why did they do
yeah,
that there? Was there a better decision they could have made? Why might that have been a better decision? Because strategy is another really important part of gameplay, isn't it? That is, a real higher order
absolutely,
thinking
yeah.
skill.
Yeah,
Um,
and all of that
yeah,
links to problem solving, I think, which is,
yes,
and as you say, mathematical thinking and reasoning. And I think games have got there's a huge opportunity with games to, as you say, practice, but also develop those skills,
mm,
and to build a little bit of resilience as well, because sometimes we talk about uh, a lack of resilience being a barrier to
mm,
learning, particularly in maths, as well. Um, just to go on a slight tangent, you did mention inclusion earlier.
mm,
Now, I have witnessed in some settings over years pupils who are not engaged with the rest of the learning in the class being given a laptop and a game,
yeah,
and saying, have a go at this whilst the rest of us are working on something else. I'm thinking there particularly about children who might be working well below the level that their peers are working at. Um, how do you feel about games, digital games, being used in that sort of way to support or
Mm,
possibly replace the teaching of pupils with maybe SEND or just
mm.
who are not working at the level of their peers?
I think that, again, I'm going to give a sort of it depends answer, because I think it depends on the game and it depends on the purpose of that game for that
Yeah,
child. And one of the things that is really difficult to measure or prove is transferability of learning, not just from I've played a game and now I'm in a maths lesson, but even across lessons. We know ourselves, don't we? You know, you teach something on a Monday and come Tuesday, it's like you didn't bother.
yeah,
Um, so enabling children, I think it depends on what is around that activity. So is the child then supported and encouraged to think about what they've just played, and how does that relate to them then being able to be included in the learning with their peer group? Does it scaffold a little bit like pre-teaching?
yes,
Does it scaffold their thinking in a way that then enables them to be included alongside their peer group in the mathematical learning? I think I'm uneasy with the idea of games being used as a, if I've given them that, and I mean, yeah, I wouldn't like to suggest that anybody does this, but if they're busy, and I can sort of say they've done some maths, you
yeah,
know, um,
yeah.
so I think they're not, like with anything. There is. I mean, I'm biased, but I don't think there is any substitute for good teaching,
No,
good
I agree. I
conversations, and
agree.
good questioning. So
I
yeah,
think
for me, I think it's
it can
about
be
how it's
difficult, can't it?
used.
Yeah, it can be difficult knowing how limited resources are in schools at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah,
That I can see that there might be a place where you think, okay, I worked with this child or that group yesterday, and we learned this. This game will help them
okay,
to
yes.
develop that further or practice
So
that
that's
skill.
consolidation. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly, and
yeah.
it's purposeful, isn't it?
Yes,
And there's a reason for it, a
yeah,
pedagogically sound reason for it. I think that's
yes,
very different from this child can't access the learning, but they can play this game, and there's some maths in it, as you say. So the
completely,
design of the
completely.
game and the purpose of doing it need to kind of um,
Yeah,
convene, don't they? So that there's a
yeah,
reason for it, and that you can articulate that reason. I think otherwise, it's as you say, just sort of a holding activity, which wouldn't
yeah.
be great, would it?
And I need to be choosing those games with the same level of professional discernment as I
Yes.
would any activity or task that I would put into my
And
lessons.
that's important. That's an important point, isn't it? Because the only way that you can have that discernment is if you've actually had a go at the game yourself. You can look at the flashy brochures and the screenshots and say, "Oh yeah, this looks fantastic. Have a go at this." But we do, and hey, I'm just trying to give teachers an excuse to spend an hour playing games. But that you do need to have a go at the game, don't you? Whether that's digital
Mm.
or non-digital.
I think it makes you a better teacher because in playing the game, you become the learner. And
Yeah,
so you've got a better insight into what they might be thinking or feeling or needing at any point during that game. Exactly the same as, I mean, I have been guilty in my teaching career of struggling for something and popping an enriched task in front of a group of children,
absolutely.
having not
Yeah,
maybe explored it myself to the degree that I should have
yeah,
done. And then suddenly you've got all this mess in front of you that is yeah, okay, maybe if I had thought about that a bit more carefully, I wouldn't have presented it in that way. So yeah, but being a playful, reminding yourself that part of being a teacher is to be a playful learner helps those ideas of play and playful pedagogies and a playful approach to mathematics seep into your teaching a little bit more, I think.
yeah. I agree. We've covered absolutely loads, and I know time is a little bit against us now, and
Mm.
we could talk a lot
Yeah.
more. I know. Honestly, I sent Sam about 30 questions, I think, and actually looking through them, we've covered quite a lot of them. You've covered quite a lot of the points, Sam. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Um, one of the two final things that I just wanted to mention was, um, lots of games come with inbuilt rewards or, behavior management tools sometimes even,
Mm.
and those sorts of things. What do you see as the should there be rewards built into the is that a necessary part of I'm thinking of particularly a digital game now, that competitive side of things, leaderboards, points, is that always a positive thing? Is there a danger? And I know this is gonna be a gray area, but,
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that side of things, if you don't mind.
Sure. I think it is a really grey area because, again, looking across some of not just Alison James's work on play, but also some of the work on games-based learning and games for maths research, there's a real mixed picture about the benefits and limitations of extrinsic motivation and the benefits and limitations of intrinsic motivation. And also how extrinsic motivation is linked to competition. And
Yeah,
some children really thrive under those circumstances. I think my experience would say that the children that tend to thrive with extrinsic motivation and competition are those that already have a sense of themselves as competent in something. So again, I come back to this idea of they can show how strong they are. It's sort of they've built the muscle and now they can
yeah,
show how strong they are, and that's really valid. Some people really love that. I mean, if they didn't, sport wouldn't exist, would it? So,
absolutely. Yeah,
and that's really valid. Um, I worry that without a balance of opportunities for all children to play, sometimes in a way that doesn't involve competition, the damage that can be done through a piece of misapplied competitive extrinsic motivation is quite high, I think. Now I know that I've got a subjective view of that because that was my experience, but I don't think I'm unique in that from
no,
talking to children and student teachers and teachers across my career. So I think again it's about teachers. We come back to that age old necessity of teachers knowing their learners, understanding some of these bigger ideas about motivational aspects, um, and the effect of different experiences on children, and then and sort of navigating the way through that. Um, yeah, I mean, some children will turn everything into a competition, whether it's intended or not,
yes,
and that's and
yeah,
if they're comfortable with that, who am I to sort of criticize? But I worry that if we start with extrinsic motivation, it doesn't really give the space for ownership and
yeah,
agency and time. Um, yeah, and those things that matter in terms of intrinsic motivation and how I feel about the subject.
yeah. No, I totally agree. And again, it comes back to, as you say, for me, knowing your pupils, knowing what's going to work for, and that takes time. And it
Mm,
can be difficult when you've got 30 of them or 33 of them or whatever. And,
yeah,
and if you're part time, you only see them 2 days a week or whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah.
th- it really does rely on knowing those things in order to make informed choices about what's going to work for each of them. And there probably isn't one solution that fits everybody, as you say.
And I think it relates again to what you said earlier about building resilience. And sometimes I build resilience because I'm good at something.
Yeah,
I feel better about it because I've achieved some success. So
yeah,
resilience
it's interesting.
so
I think, in my experience, some of the as you say, some children really, really responded to competition well. Particularly, I
mm,
think it helps if you're good at it,
yes,
and you can be
yes,
successful, and you can be rewarded for that, then that works really, really well. If you find something difficult, and you can see everybody else being successful at it, that can have a real negative impact on you, I think. I think
mm,
one of the things that did work for a lot of pupils was team competitions where they could contribute but weren't expected to necessarily be the star
yeah, that's nice.
of that particular team, but felt like
Yeah,
that they were still contributing, could see the team
yeah.
doing well, or encourage others to do well.
And
So yeah,
collaboration's such an important part of gameplay too. You know, if
yeah,
especially one of the things that I'm grappling with is how do I take what is essentially an individual activity of playing a digital maths game and make that something collaborative. And watching children play um, games together
yes,
and encouraging them. And again, this isn't simple, is it? Because often you'll have one child that takes over, one child that sits back, but finding ways of encouraging those social dimensions of learning of, okay, so how are you going to make this so that you agree on your next move? And when you hit a barrier, how are you going to navigate your way through what your next choice will be, or how you're going to undo a mistake, or all those sorts of things. So that's nice, isn't it? An idea of collaboration with competition. Maybe that's how we solve it.
yeah, yeah, maybe.
Mm.
And it is great because you do hear those conversations, whether it's a maths-based game or any other sort of game. You hear those conversations happen organically,
Yeah.
without necessarily having to prompt them. You know,
Mm.
if we're PE is a prime example for me. You see children working together or trying to, talking about what they can do and what they can't do, what they're finding difficult, what will work, and a better way of doing things. Those sorts of things happen organically all the
Mm.
time,
Mm.
when you are provided with the opportunity to do
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
games are one of the ways I think that we can provide that opportunity, whether it's digital. Probably happens, as you say, more often when it's not digital based.
Mm.
But maybe there is a way of bringing that into
Yeah.
a
I,
digital space.
popping a digital game onto the class whiteboard, playing
Yeah.
it together. As a
Well, it's
teacher, you can
interesting,
model
isn't
your
it?
own
When you think
thinking.
of the games, and now I'm thinking about gaming games, as in
Yeah.
console games and things, but
Hmm.
the popularity of those as a multiplayer,
Yes.
collaborative thing is huge.
Yeah.
Most children, I would say now, are playing games with other children or other people
Mm.
online, for better or
Mm.
worse,
Mm.
depending on what the game is. But
Mm.
there is something where we want to play games with other people and not always just
Mm.
on our own. So yeah, huge
Mm.
opportunities there, I think. Um,
Yeah.
Sam, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us this
Oh, it's
morning.
been a pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, there's always so much with these interviews that I take away and I think about, and I know that there's stacks from today that I'm going to be thinking about for ages. So, thank
Yeah,
you
me
so
too.
much for that. If people want to find out more about yourself or
Mhm.
Number Club or the work that you guys are doing, what's the best way to get in touch?
Well, if you wanted to sort of have a direct conversation with me, you could contact me on LinkedIn, or I'm on Twitter, X, sorry. Still haven't got used to that. And if you're interested in having a look at any of the Number Club games, then you can just go to numberclub.com and have a look at some of the things that we're sharing there in terms of putting some of this stuff into practice. But yeah, they're probably the best ways to get in touch with me. And I'd love to hear from
Fantastic.
anybody that would like to.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do want to get in touch with Sam, if you want to, if you're not on LinkedIn, you want to send a message, feel free to send it to myself at primarymathspodcast at twinkle.co.uk. That's twinkle without an E. And I will forward that on to Sam, and she'll be able to reply to you. Um, Likewise, if you have anything else that you would like to add to this conversation, as
Mm.
always, Becky and I will be back on Friday with an Aftermaths episode where we will unpick a little bit of the conversation that we've had today. In fact, this week we're going to be joined by Sally as well, who is going to share her expertise in this area too, just to discuss what we've talked about and what we've heard today with Sam. Um, we would love to hear from you and we'd love to make you part of that conversation as well. So please do get in touch. You can find us on any of the social media platforms, really. We're there somewhere. Just look for Primary Maths Podcast or email us at primarymathspodcast at twinkle.co.uk. And otherwise, we will see you in Friday's Aftermaths episode. Sam, thank you once again. It's been absolutely fascinating, and we will talk again in the future, I'm sure. But thank you so much
Yes.
for giving up your time.
Thanks, John. Real pleasure. Thank you.